Okay, guys, so I want you to welcome back Jelle Dittmar, and I'm finally saying his name correctly after all these years. You guys know Jelle if you've been subscribed to this channel at all, if you've been on Pro Feedback's platform at all. Jelle and I go back to 2020, actually, and I just looked at our first interview. I'll link it below if you guys want to see how young we both looked about 5 years ago. And Jelle was one of these producers, composers that reached out to me and said that he had discovered sync licensing. He came from the band world, very similar to me, but was able to get his foot in the door with quite a few and very, very prominent production music libraries. And that trajectory and that trend has only continued since the beginning of his journey back in 2019, 2020. And fast forward to literally just last month, and Jelle was nominated and won a MARC award. If you guys don't know what a MARC award is essentially like the Grammys for production music libraries and for production music composers. It is a very prestigious, high-end award that the Production Music Association gives out at their annual conference. Jelle was nominated along with the publisher that he distributed the track through, and he won. So obviously, congrats, man. That's really great. It's got to feel really good to be recognized by your peers, by the industry as a whole, and to be on stage in front of, I think it was like 400 or 500 people or something like that. So that's got to feel really good. But more important than all of these great things happening in your career, I want everybody that's watching this to kind of really zero in on the fact that this has not been an easy path for Jelle. The fact that he had to go against many odds, essentially, and he had to essentially break his way into this industry, being an outsider like all of us are in the beginning of our careers. I was also an outsider. All of us have basically no connections in this business, but he was able to forge his way into this industry with really high quality music. So I want you guys to just kind of pay attention to when we talk about those aspects, especially the psychological, emotional roller coasters that we go on in this business, to just know that wherever you are in your career, you're struggling, you're in the beginning phases, you got some doubts. So does Jelle, so do I. So this is just kind of part of our journey as sync licensing producers. So welcome back to the channel, Jelle. Good to see you, man. Go ahead and give us the story of the MARC Award, going back to when you were notified you were nominated. How did you feel? And then you obviously decided to fly out. And I remember meeting with you actually the afternoon of. You didn't think you were going to win. You were pretty doubtful, but you still put on the tuxedo and still decided to show up and put on a good face. And then you won. So walk us through this whole story, how this all happened.
Yeah, basically, I think it was around August or something like that. I got a phone call from my library owner, and we submitted this track, this horror track for the suspension and tension category. And he basically had me 2 tracks to choose from, and I chose one particular track because my father made an instrument which is called the Apprehension Engine, invented by composer Mark Corvin, or commissioned by Mark Corvin, who is responsible for films like The Witch or The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. And basically my father made that instrument, and because that instrument was in this track that my library laid out for me, I decided, well, let's take a gamble and go with this track. It sounded very atonal, very harsh, I would say. There is not a lot of melodic content in that track, so it's very, very experimental. But it was like, yeah, let's fuck it. Let's just go ahead, try this, and we'll see how it ends up. And even when we submitted this track, I was very doubtful that we would even be nominated. So then in August, fast forward, in August, my publisher, Ed Scott from Dutch Bullet Music in London, called me and he said, well, you are nominated now officially. So that was already like, okay, mind blow. So I know that there are a lot of libraries that are submitting to the MARC Awards, like dozens, if not hundreds, that are submitting to the MARC Awards. So being nominated with 3 other great, incredible composers, I listened to their tracks and I was like, yeah, there's no way we are going to win this. Like, their tracks were so polished, so well made, that I was like, yeah, I'm already glad I'm nominated in the first place. So I was already planning to go into the PMC, which is part of the MARC Awards. So there's a conference hosted by the Production Music Association, and they have the MARC Awards tied to that conference. And I was already planning to go to this conference to meet the people I already work with. And then fun story, 2 days before I departed to LA, I figured out there was a dress code. So I was really stressing out to find myself one of those jackets, because in my size, like I'm 6'7", there is not, even in the Netherlands, there is not a lot of clothing stores that sell this stuff. So I got lucky. And then at the Mark Awards, yeah, we were sitting at a table like in this big ballroom in the Hilton, and my publisher and I were like, "Yeah, we had a good run. This was fun. We're nominated. That's already what matters." And then they called my name that I've won, and I just in a split second I just couldn't believe it because the tracks that the other composers sent were, in my opinion, way better than my tracks. So the feeling of shock, but also disbelief, went through my head when I won that award. And then, yeah, my publisher basically he got out of that mindset of that shock the quickest, and he pulled me on stage in front of all those people. So that was really, yeah, basically on. In that moment, I just went on autopilot, and just thanked everyone for the honor of winning that award, basically. So yeah, that was so. Long story short, I was shocked.
Absolutely makes sense. There's a couple interesting things that you pointed out there. The first thing that stands up to me is, your belief in that, man, these other tracks are just way better than mine. Way more polished, way more ready for TV. Mine was very experimental and kind of weird and atonal and stuff. So obviously mine's not as good as theirs. Therefore, I'm not going to win this kind of thing. I find that a lot of producers struggle with that, and it's not necessarily it sometimes can be a sort of sense of like, yes, we all know that, like, hey, there are certain producers and composers that are at these levels that are definitely above us. We can all hear it and know it, and we're aspiring to get up there. But there's also this fact of this industry, and especially with award shows, right? There's always a subjective opinion to all of it. It's just somebody saying they think this is a really interesting piece of production music, of course. But there is this imposter syndrome that can creep up into all of us where we sometimes can get big placements or big opportunities, and we don't think that we're the best qualified for it. Or we think, really, you sure you want to put my track on that national campaign? Like, I get that. And there's this kind of weird reorientation to the world when that happens, because it makes us feel like, are we really good enough to do we deserve this, right? Is our talent and our hard work that we put into this really worthy of the recognition or the placement or the royalties or the sync fee that we're receiving? So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that even you, doing great in this business, very accomplished, winning awards, getting into all the major players essentially, still have that kind of doubt of like, I'm sure they're gonna win. Mine wasn't there, and for one reason or another, maybe it was because your track was pretty experimental, or it had some just a unique approach to production music, which they were like, yeah, we want to highlight this because we think this is really interesting, and I think this is going to be, something for our TV and film clients as a whole, to realize that we're not just making stock production music that just sort of always fits into the groove, but we can push creativity forward as well. We can kind of be artists ourselves, and it's definitely been the theme here on this channel for many years now at this point. So that's great, man. It's really cool to hear. I want to also have you share a little bit about your workflow right now and your workload and how busy you are and how seriously you are taking your sync career, because I don't want anybody to think that you just sort of, when you feel inspired, you go pop, you dabble in front of your keyboard, and then once in a while you get some albums out there, and then, oh, you got nominated, and it just sort of just is happening. You are working your ass off, month after month, year after year now, 5 years in total. What is your schedule looking like these days? How many albums are you simultaneously working on? Like how many hours a day are you working on music? Like, just walk us through exactly what your workload looks like.
I'm probably working on too many albums at the moment.
I would
to
agree
be
with
honest,
you.
like, yeah, I mean, I'm working on 8 albums simultaneously. So one day I'm just composing horror, then I'm composing neoclassical trailer, then I'm composing Viking metal, as an example. So my days are very varied, and I try to make one track a day, which is basically the John Williams method a little bit. I might stop with that because it's just so overwhelming, because I get a request from a library through my email basically every day. Every day I get a new project that comes in, and I want to do everything. I enjoy working on all these projects, like for the simplest TV show, because I know how difficult it is to get into this industry. So if I say no to a publisher or to a library, I kind of feel like a bit like I take it for granted. But it's perfectly fine to say no at times. So that's basically what I'm trying to do now. I try to say more no to libraries, but still offer them something in return so that they don't get offended or they don't ask me back for the next project. So if they say, we want you to make 4 tracks by the end of the month, I say, well, maybe 2 or 1. So trying to build some periods of rest into my schedule is something that I'm trying to focus on more and more lately, because I want to do this for the rest of my life. And if I just continue cranking out these tracks every day, I'm sure to hit a burnout at 40, for example.
Or much sooner.
Yeah, or much sooner. I mean, I've already been to... I think I already had the symptoms of having a burnout 2 years ago. And after that, I really went down, or I really tried to take on less projects, and that helped. And now I'm at the point where I maybe need to do that again. Because in the end, right now, I'm getting a project, for example, for a trailer custom. I did a custom for Warhammer 40K, which didn't get accepted, but it was still a lot of energy I put into that mock-up or in that pitch. So basically how that works, you're getting a brief from the trailer house, and then you need to make a track in their style, and you only have 24 hours to fully compose, mix, and master it. That's fun to do maybe once a month, but if you get those kinds of placements or that kind of requests every day, then it becomes a little bit problematic. So I'm trying to get more rest into my schedule as well, whilst also taking on the projects that I really care about and that I really enjoy, and where I can be very creative as well.
And that's a great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. The element of balance, which I think all of us struggle with, because we're all workaholics. We all are addicted to music, and to say like, oh yeah, you got to do that a little bit less. It's like, well, why? It's kind of what I love doing. It's what I'm hooked on doing. So, but you're right. You're kind of realizing the limits of your ability to keep up with that ridiculous pace, which is this like this dichotomy of sync licensing, which is simultaneously the slowest moving industry on planet Earth, because it takes forever for your royalties and your income to get going and growing and your relationships to kind of solidify. And at the same time, you have these unbelievably fast, tight deadlines that you have to get everything done immediately. And you have to drop literally everything in your life, stay up all night, live on caffeine essentially to get this stuff done. So it's very challenging to have all the patience to stick with it long enough, but also have that kind of like get up and go as needed. Like you said, on maybe on a rarer basis, not as an everyday basis. You said you could finish a whole track a day. That is amazing to me, especially because I've heard your music and I know how intricate and complex your music can be. When you say you complete a track every single day, are you talking about like a full orchestral trailer track? Are you talking about maybe more minimal orchestral music? Like what kind of genres can you complete in one day right now?
Both. Basically everything that I get handed to, I can complete that in a day. I try not to, because like I said, I try to build in some more rest, and I don't want to give the libraries this sense of, or this feeling that I can basically make a track for their brief in one day, because that's dangerous, because then they just give you these even stricter deadlines to work for that, or to work an entire album, for example, in a day. Which is something I really like to avoid. But yeah, basically, if orchestral track, like I said, I did this trailer for Warhammer 40K, which was a bespoke trailer track, which was fully orchestral with choral, drums, and it was basically scoring to picture. So I also had the footage of the trailer, which was a 3-minute trailer or something, and I had to score to picture, which I rarely do, because with trailers, you most of the time just get a brief, you need to make a track, and they'll add the video on top of that. But in this case, they already had the pre-rendered version of that trailer done, so they expected me to score to picture. And so it was a fully orchestral track, sound design as well. I had to record live instruments for that as well, so I have a couple of weird instruments in my studio here. I had to record that in just one day, so I had 24 hours to fully compose that and mix and master it.
Yeah, that seems unbelievable to me. I mean, you must have some very efficient systems in place, templates, go-to sounds. You must kind of really also have some sort of an internal creative process that as you're getting your track ready, you kind of already know where you need to go with it. It's not maybe so much of a process of, oh, that's a cool idea, this, that, but you kind of maybe have some sort of like, I know exactly where it needs to start, where it needs to build, how it needs to grow, and you probably, I'm imagining, right? Is that kind of how your process works? You have
I do.
Yeah. It's almost like you've already got the sketch and you're just tracing it now. Yeah, you're just kind of filling in the gaps.
Yeah, and also I have a template with my most go-to tracks, and basically I can just enable and disable the tracks or the instruments that I basically use often, or if I want to try something else or experiment a little bit. Most of the time, I with those projects that have a very tight deadline, I just play it safe. I know a bit of musical theory that just plays along in my head, and you're right. There is probably a method I'm using in my head subconsciously to come up with ideas. But if I would need to describe it, I have no idea how I do it actually. So it's basically stay with what's safe, try to be inspired by the brief with the reference tracks, but don't copy it. And I think with taking inspiration from those reference tracks and make it my own, I really exceed in doing so. So it's exhausting. I can tell you that.
Let's dive into that more. Yeah, the burnout factor, which
Yeah.
I've hit it many times in my career. It sounds like you've gotten to your form of it, and maybe you're feeling a little bit now too. Um, which I guess which parts of this business are burning you out? Is it just the workload? Is it sometimes the idea of, all right, I got to sort of keep serving the needs of other people. This isn't really my own creative, flow coming out of me. I'm kind of more being a craftsman here and having to work on other people's projects. Is that part of it? Is it just the workload, or is it, are there maybe certain genres that you're like, okay, I've done 18, whatever tracks. I'm done with that genre. I can't do any more of that. Is it more about switching things up? Like, what elements have you found so far that have been causing you the most burn? And I think this is going to be really interesting for everybody watching, because if you guys watching this have not hit burnout yet, it's coming for you. Okay, you can't avoid it. It's going to come for you. So hopefully this is going to be an interview and some insights you can take with you and remember when you do hit your wall. This is going to be some helpful, useful insights for you. So go ahead, Yellow. What's causing your burnout, or what elements are just not that fun about this?
Well, actually, the one genre I got asked a lot in the beginning of my career were felt piano with strings. Because felt piano, and not even with strings, like just solo piano, I got asked a lot of those kinds of projects because the piano is my main instrument. It's what I'm the most comfortable with. And at some point, I was doing like 50 a year, 50 tracks a year in that genre. And at some point, it just felt like an office job. And that's exactly why I didn't get into music, to have the feeling I have to go to the office all day and do stuff I don't want to do. So I just don't take any solo piano tracks anymore, unless there is a very nice budget for live strings. Then I consider it. But yeah, just solo piano is not something I do anymore because of the amount of tracks or briefs I got in that genre. That's basically one thing. The other thing that's really burning me out is taking or putting all this energy in my career, and it just takes forever and ever and ever for those royalties to show. So it's this insecurity, or no, it's the uncertainty of, do I get paid for these tracks, or is the energy I'm putting into this worth it? That's basically the one thought that's burning me out 100%. It's not even the workload, it's not even the amount of tracks I make, it's just that insecurity, that uncertainty. Do my tracks make money, and when do I see the results? That's the one thing that's been burning me out real quick. Yeah.
Yep, and it burned me out many times as well, because I remember countless times getting those royalty checks in the first couple of years of my career going, that's it? That's my big pay check today? Like, it was just like, what? Like, I couldn't even believe it. It was like $50, $200, $500, even though, yeah, on a graph, they're exponentially increasing. I'm like, I can't even pay my rent with this massive exponential increase in my rel, right? So I do remember that consistently, constantly feeling like, okay, here we go again. Like, it always felt like a fork in the road every time, every royalty check. It was always a fork in the road. It was like, all right, well, I've committed 4 years at this point or 5 years at this point, and am I going to keep doing this, or is this just kind of telling me that this just isn't working for me, or maybe this industry isn't as going to be promising as I thought it was going to be for me? I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, and I totally can relate to all of those that insecurity and that uncertainty of, and also just the feeling of, I don't want to be a sucker, right? I don't want to be the guy that's spending 5 or 10 years of my life believing in myself, even though, I'm not seeing a ton of results, and then eventually being shown like, yeah, it was probably the wrong move. I should have moved into something else. I just didn't want to be made a fool of, after many, many years of it. So, and I wish I could give everybody a sort of like, well, you just stick with it and great things will happen. But there are no guarantees, as you know, Yella, there's just nothing that you can do. But I would say if there is somebody that's doing all the right things, it would be you. I would definitely say you have great personal direct connections with all the libraries that you work with. You obviously have met them, you're flying out, you're making the in-person connections. This is a relationship business for sure. Music is, very important, and you got to make sure you have high quality music. But at the end of the day, people do like to work with people that they like. People like to help out people that they enjoy the company of. So if there's an opportunity for Yella with, some of his publishers, if they have a great relationship, that's going to help grease those wheels a little bit more to allow him to rise up to the top and get offered for some of these great opportunities. So that makes a big difference. And so you're definitely, doing everything that you can within your control. You're doing everything that you can. But again, yeah, it's like it's that ultimate personal, call it a spiritual journey we all have to go through in sync, which is like, am I going to take another step forward? Should I just keep going on this path? Because I'm seeing, you're seeing some results, you're seeing some placements, you're seeing some royalties trickle in, but I'm sure by this point you were expecting a lot more. You were expecting that you were going to be in some other stratosphere, and you're like, well, is this a sign that I'm just about to get there? Or is this a sign that this is just as far as this industry is going to take me or whatever? So, and I've been trying to be very respectful of everybody's decisions on that, because I've definitely had some of our students who, decided to throw in the towel after 5-7 years. They're just like, I've made a couple grand after this many years doing this, and this just ain't for me. I got to find something else. And I say, hey, I respect that, because yeah, it's, you get one life, you get one career essentially. And for some people, it seems to be working better than for others. And I just can't tell if or when that sort of breakthrough moment will come for any one of us. I know for me, it was definitely, I think it was like 5, 6, 7 years, somewhere around there. My royalties shot up to this new level of like, oh, I can pay my bills now. And it was just this, not getting rich, but definitely just like, I can rely on this, and I can kind of let go of a lot of the other independent contract work. But, for some producers that comes, I know Anthony Crawford, I don't know if you remember Yella at Sync Up, he went from...
I met him at the PMC actually.
Oh, he was there, right on.
Well.
Right on,
there,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went from like basically, I think it was like $200 to like almost 10,000 in his royalties in 2 years. So, and that's very rare. And I always tell everybody, don't expect that. That's very rare. He's probably the only guy I've ever heard of that happening to. But it's a reality, with the right music, with the right publishers, the right opportunities, great things can happen. And I do believe, consistency and hard work does pay off. So, but I just want everybody to definitely just notice that success and doing well also comes with a lot of insecurity and uncertainty, and really not sure of if this is going to be the right fit for you. So let's end with that. Yella, what would you say to somebody who's maybe, a year in, 2 years in at this point, which is probably, I would say, the vast majority of my audience. And, they hear this, they see great things happening, but they also hear the uncertainty, the doubt of like, should I go dedicate the next 5 years of my life to this to see if it's going to work out? What would you say to them? Would you tell them to go for it if they believed in it? Would you tell them like, I would just wait and see until I give you guys better results? Like, just be honest. Like, what would you tell somebody who's just getting started?
I would say definitely invest in your own sound. So explore musically who you are, like who are your biggest heroes and what music comes natural to you. For me, it's orchestral music. Orchestral music comes natural to me. And that's basically something I would recommend someone who's starting out in this industry, because you need to do this for so long. If you're up for it, I want to do this for 40 years, so I better do this with a musical genre that I enjoy every time I'm making it. So that's one thing, discovering your own sound, and also realizing that this is not an easy industry. Music industry, even with AI right now on the horizon, it will always be difficult. There will always be sacrifices that you will need to make, and you need to be asking yourself, am I willing to give up going to a birthday once in a while, or am I willing to don't have a social life at all at some point? That's basically, especially with sync licensing, a reality in music that's really that's really how do you say it? It's something that can happen. It can definitely happen. So you need to ask yourself that question as well. Am I really ready to work 24 hours for with no pay grade in sight, or no royalty in sight, am I really willing, or am I really willing to take all this time, all these years, all this dedication for maybe a very, I don't know, a small royalty amount every year? So you really need to enjoy it. You need to be crazy at times, and you just need to have fun. I think that's something that you always need to remember. Why did I want to go into this industry? It's always the music. It always has been the music. But it's the music industry. It's tough. It's difficult to get into, or even to, especially to succeed in. So yeah, those are the two main things I would give beginning composers as advice. Yeah.
That's great, man. Really cool to hear. And I hope you guys are really taking that to heart. You know, one thing I heard recently was a great reframe that I keep with me now is that, you know, pursuing your dreams and pursuing your passion is difficult. It's very hard. But you know what? Not pursuing your passion and not pursuing your dreams is difficult, very hard, you know, full of regrets, full of, oh, I wish I could have, or a lot of bitterness. So you kind of have to just choose where your difficulty is going to be in life. You don't get to choose one path without difficulties. They'll all have difficulties, but do you want to have the difficulties of pursuing and going for what you want to go for, or not? And again, that's not meant to put pressure on anybody that sync licensing is the end all be all. It's not. And that's why I think 90 to 95% of people don't do well with sync licensing, because it's just not the right fit for their personality and what they want to do. But wherever you guys want to go with your careers, with your music careers, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. Sync is no different, and it's going to be a hard road ahead. But hopefully, with conversations like this and community like this, and with great people like Jelle here, you guys can know that there are other people that are also just as crazy and maybe desperate for success in sync licensing as you are.
Definitely desperate.
Definitely desperation. Desperation is top up there. You know, having fun and being desperate for it. I think those are the two top ones. But just so everybody knows, that's what this is really about, and that's what hopefully this channel is giving you guys. It's just some sense of like, you're not crazy, you're not alone. You know, all of us are trying to pursue this in one way or another at different parts of our career. So Jelle, thank you so much, man, for your time. We really appreciate it. Obviously, we're going to get you back on with updates of your career from time to time. If you guys have questions for Jelle about his music, about what he's doing, go ahead and post it below. I'm sure he'll be able to answer. Or if not, we'll have a follow-up conversation about it. So we appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.